Welcome everyone to another IHN Con Ed webinar. For those that don't know me, my name is Jason Madden. I am the campus manager here at IHN Vancouver, where I'm hanging out currently in a classroom. And I'm also program advisor for IHN Online. And joining us this evening, we have Dr. David Duizer, and he'll be sharing some of the materials from his upcoming continuing education course, Understanding Lab Diagnostics and Clinical Practice, which will be starting February 6th. And we'll talk a little bit more of that at the end of today's talk. But so today, this evening, sharing a little bit of some of the material that he covers in that course. Dr. David Duizer is a naturopathic doctor with a special interest in a holistic approach to cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmune disease. And his clinical focus is really addressed at getting to the cause of disease and supporting the body's natural ability to heal. So Dr. David's earned a Bachelor of Science at the Royal Military College in Kingston, as well as a Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine from Boucher. And I was just looking at the dates, David, and you're going into your 5th year working with us here at IHN, which is
amazing. Hey,
exciting. Yeah. So it's great to have you on, and I'll hand it over to you to take us for tonight.
Thanks very much for the kind intro, Jason. And thanks to IHN for having me back again. Now I have 2 different courses that I'm teaching. So I'm going to be teaching like all year round for IHN CE, which I'm thrilled about. I just love teaching, and I hope that comes across a bit today in this short little session. So let's jump into my slides because that'll kind of inform the approach here. Let's get these going and share the slideshow. Hopefully you can see that and you can see me in the corner. Today's session is called Making Weight Loss Efficient, Objective Laboratory Values to Assess Metabolism. So we want to have a look at lab work that can be done when people think their metabolism is low. It's a really important session to me considering, like Jason said, I'm trying to help people prevent disease. And metabolic dysfunction is a key cause of disease, including all of the key diseases that get Canadians. Cardiovascular disease and cancer being 2 of the top ones, but also a close third, Alzheimer's disease is an important one from a metabolism perspective as well. Some people call it type 3 diabetes. So anyhow, I see that there may be some questions and some chat coming in. We're going to address those at the end. So I'll be speaking for 45 minutes today, and then we'll get to the chat just so the flow is not interrupted. But I will answer everything that comes in, and we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. If you don't ask it during, we'll open up the floor at that time. So as Jason said, I've got a course coming up where I'm teaching about lab diagnostics. Why do I think lab diagnostics are important for holistic nutritionists? Well, my wife's a holistic nutritionist, and it's very helpful for us to communicate about objective change when you have a background. She has a good background in understanding lab work. So from a personal perspective, we get a ton of value out of knowing the topics that we discuss. But from a clinical perspective, in my practice, we work with nutritionists all the time. And in order to be part of the team, you got to speak the language. And so the course is all about speaking the language and improving familiarity with all the labs that you typically would see on a day-to-day basis in a practice that works with people who are unwell. And that's kind of what we cover. It's not a treatment-based course. It's a familiarity course. We cover conventional labs and functional labs. So everything that would be, kind of done at a primary care practice, like most naturopathic practices try to be. And in addition to that, functional testing, a functional testing review. And I think the coolest thing about that is holistic nutritionists can sign up for so many of the functional labs now. We have an entire list going of labs that people can sign up for right after the course and add to their repertoire of objective assessment. So that's a really cool perk. I've been in practice for 10 years. And I have had tons and tons of experience. I work at a clinic that's tied to a pharmacy. And so I have been working in chronic disease since day one and have seen diseases and disorders of all nature, all the way from working with kids to people who are passing of dangerous conditions. And so I have lots of things that I could be sharing. But over the last few years, I've been measuring metabolic rate using the Pinoe metabolism assessment device and making programs for people in 3 different streams. One is a weight loss stream. So we create calorie deficits based on the objective measures found during metabolism assessment, which I'll be speaking to that a bit today. But the other 2 streams are really cool too. We work with optimizing nutrition for athletes and people trying to perform at a high level fitness wise. And then the third extreme is in chronic disease. People who have chronic disease need to eat enough or sometimes a little less. And so measuring metabolism has been really supportive of that. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about disease prevention from a metabolism sort of starting point, and gotten a ton of value out of everything we're about to discuss today. So I hope you get a similar amount of value out of it too. I should mention that I have a podcast called Personalized, sponsored by Vitamin Lab, where I host practitioners of all sorts and talk about how they individualize care. And if you want to listen to the podcast, it's on all the platforms. Just either put in my last name or put in Personalized, and you'll hear some of my first episodes. And it has been just a joy to speak to some of the world's experts on individualized care, from acupuncturists to chiros to medical physicians to naturopaths. It's been really cool. And I got a bunch of really cool episodes coming up soon. So check it out. Personalized. It's the best. Today's learning objectives. We have to understand what drives metabolic rate. So we'll talk about nutrients, hormones, etc. We have to talk about conventional labs and the most appropriate, that are most appropriate for tracking when someone thinks they have low metabolic rate. And then we're going to talk about optimals. So we'll talk about what are the optimals for the labs based on some of the evidence that I like to follow. And then we'll talk about maybe some nutritional strategies that could help us reach those optimals. Then we'll look at how to build a weight loss program to support the best metabolic weight rate a person could have. And we'll talk about helping clients maintain their success through a metabolism-focused nutrition practice, which is partially what I'm running here now, because we do nutrition plans. But we've tested over 700 people, so we've done 700 resting metabolism tests, and have found that many people have low metabolic rates, just like they think they do. The people say, they're coming in, and the doctor has said, you need to eat less and move more, and they say, well, I've tried that. And you think, well, gee, what the heck? Are you sure? Are you sure? As we measure it, and then, yeah, it turns out that their metabolism is low and they have tried that, and it's just not working. So we need to boost that metabolic rate back up so that can actually work for them, and prescribe an individualized program to help them reach the goal that they have in front of them. So I've been through that an awful lot. Fortunately, in this province, we can run conventional labs. So all the labs that we'll be talking about today, I have run. And I'm sure you have probably come across your desk as well. If you have any case studies you'd like to share, or any questions about some cases, those are good topics to save for the Q&A. Say, oh, this person had this test and it showed this. Do you think that impacts metabolic rate? Those would be really, really great questions. So please bring those. So we have to talk about creating weight loss plans for good and bad burners. If someone's a good burner, it means that their metabolism, this is how I define it anyways, it means that their metabolic rate is very similar or better than predicted for their age, height, and gender. So if you're not measuring resting rate, you can simply plug in their metrics into a calculator that spits out basal metabolic rate. And then you can estimate the daily activities and the exercise to get their calorie burn, and you can program for whatever body composition change you want. That works really well in good burners. But what if someone is a bad burner? What should we be doing? Years and years ago, we used to say, okay, you need to overeat for 3 months, right? Like you need to eat in excess and go lift weights and eat as much as possible, and then your metabolism will come back. Well, yeah, that works, but it's a bit extreme. It doesn't have to go like that. And plus, it doesn't also treat the cause. It treats the cause if a person was simply under eating for a very long time, which is very rarely the cause, to be perfectly honest, although I did see it today. Shockingly enough, I did see it today. So we have to know what to do when someone is for sure a bad burner. So we have to know what goes into metabolism. And so that's partially what today is about. From a laboratory perspective, we can have an assessment. So let's talk about a case. Nothing works. I've been eating less and moving more for weeks, but nothing's going on. Well, in the sense of like the person's not losing weight. Well, what the heck could we do? We need to consider the holistic approach to metabolism assessment. I like to believe that people are telling the truth. They have been eating less and moving more, and it's not working. You see this a lot with people who are doing a lot of fasting nowadays, right? People are not eating for very long periods of time and feeling like maybe they're even gaining weight. What the heck is up with that? How is that even possible? Off the top of my head, I will say that people's metabolism does fluctuate a bit during the day. So when people stop eating, things slow down and the nutrients become lower. and that reduces metabolic rate. And the thermic effect of food is reduced because there's no food to digest. So metabolism does shift quite a bit during the day. And the evidence, the best trial I ever found was that it's about 50 calories, which doesn't seem like a lot. But I think for some people it could be more, especially if they're on medications, for example, or if they have some significant medical concerns. I think it can shift a lot more. So in this case, what are we going to do? Well, I have a case in mind where the person said this and nothing was changing. Let me tell you a little bit about this case. This case is a 56-year-old female. She had gone through menopause 6 years ago and had been overweight in her entire life. And so she felt like she had tried everything. She'd done intermittent fasting, she'd done a ketogenic diet, and she'd done training with a personal trainer. And over the course of her life, she had seen very, very small, very subtle fluctuations in her actual weight on the scale. And she was absolutely, absolutely fed up. And so we did some lab assessments. All the labs you will see here today, she has had done, and they all came back perfectly normal. So let's review a little bit of that now. Her nutrients that we tested were normal, B12 and iron. Her hormones were normal for menopause, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, fine, all within the normal range. Her inflammation scores were low. Her insulin score was normal. Even though she was overweight, she was not considered significantly insulin resistant. Her blood sugar was normal. Her cholesterol was absolutely fine. We didn't have a detailed sleep assessment, but she reported that her sleep was good. Yet she could not lose weight. And so what we did is we measured the resting rate, and we found that it was slightly below predicted. Now, on our body composition scale, there was one interesting thing that came up. Her muscle mass was slightly below what the scale would call the 100th percentile. So we have an in-body scale that measures muscle mass and body fat percentage. Her muscle mass was slightly below the 100th percentile for age, height, and gender. And we know that muscle is the most active tissue in the body, most abundantly active tissue. I think the brain is more active, but in terms of abundance, the muscle mass is burns a lot of calories compared to fat. And her muscle mass was a little lower than predicted, or a little lower than the 100th percentile for age, height, and gender. And that translated into a metabolism that was about 100 calories lower than predicted. But she had never counted calories before, never. And not that I'm a big fan of having people count calories. I like to count them for them and make a plan. So we measured the resting rate, 100 calories too low, and we created a plan that would support muscle building and be a 20% calorie deficit. And what has happened over the last 15 months is that she has put on 3 pounds of muscle, and she has lost 100 pounds and has not been hungry. And this has been just an absolute huge success. It really speaks to the power of consuming protein and boosting metabolism through protein consumption. So let's talk about the nutrition. We did decimal 7.5 times her body weight. So decimal 7.5 times her body weight in grams of protein. And we did a 750 calorie daily deficit from her total daily energy expenditure. So picture this. The math is that her resting rate is 1600. Her daily activities are 500, taking us to 21. And we predict that on average over 7 days, she's going to be burning 150 calories per day from exercise, taking us to 2250. So she's been eating at 1500 for 15 months and having 180 grams of protein, I think it is, per day. And not hungry, likes the meals, and is doing really well and consistently losing anywhere from 5 to 8 pounds per month, but on average, 6 and a bit, and is quite happy with that. So we are absolutely thrilled with that result. And I think the key lesson here is that knowing muscle mass can be quite inspiring. It can inspire someone to actually lift weights for the first time. It can inspire someone to go back to lifting weights even while being in a deficit. You would think that because we gave her less food than her resting rate, it would actually go down. We measured it again, and it is the same. So her resting rate is exactly the same as it was over a year later. So it's a really huge success story. We're incredibly proud of it. And I think the best part about it for me was that she wasn't hungry or tired the entire time. So I'm thrilled about it. But what if you can't measure resting rate? Well, what should you do? There's lots of calculators out there, but the most famous calculator for resting metabolism is the Harris-Benedict equation. You just Google it, Harris-Benedict calculator, and it gives you a basal metabolic rate. So it's important to know the difference between basal metabolic rate and resting metabolic rate. They're somewhat interchangeable, and we use them interchangeably. But basal metabolic rate means a calculated rate that would be enough calories to keep someone alive. So to support not activities of daily function, the organ systems, and keeping someone alive at rest during the day. So we plug in weight and height and age and gender, and you get what's called a BMR. Now, what we measure when we have the device for measuring is a resting rate, which is someone actually lying on a table. So but it's very, very, very close, and we treat them the same. So the BMR for this fellow here would be 1816. And then you can predict daily activities. If anyone wears an Apple Watch or any smartwatch, you can see what your move bar is or what your calorie burn is without exercise. You have a day without exercise, and you can sort of look at the calorie burn at the end of that day and see what it's like. I'm wearing an Apple Watch, and if I sit in this chair all day, even though I'm 5'10", my calorie burn is not over 500 calories. Just from sitting in this chair all day, it's somewhere between 400 and 500. Which is a miserable number to work with. That's why exercise is so important, and being up around and moving all day is so incredibly important. So we need to add on activities of daily living. So for desk jobs, which is like most people that you'll see, what I like to do is if someone is sort of like under 5'4", I like to call the ADLs 350 to 400 max, just to be conservative. If they're 5'4" to say 5'9" or so, then you could call it 400, 450, something like that. And if they're 5'10" or above, you could call it 500. And then if they're 6 foot or above, then, maybe you're thinking about 550 or 600. Those are just rough. Obviously, you need to know what a person's up to during the day. If they're working in construction, it's going to be way higher than that. They have a very active job, for example. But most people are at a desk. So you're picking a number sort of between 350 and 550 and adding that on to the basal metabolic rate. So let's say this person here is me, and we added on 500, then we could say that total daily energy expenditure without exercise is 2,300. So if we subtract from that, person should lose weight. If we add on some calories for exercise, we could have a bigger window. So what we've done here is added on 4 to 5 hard exercise sessions per week. And that brings the total energy expenditure up to 3,100. And then you could subtract from there to make a meal plan that would be a deficit. But you need to know their activity. So that's how you do it using the calculator, and it's very, very effective for like 90% of people. But what drives that number? What drives the basal metabolic rate and the resting metabolic rate? A bunch of things drive it. Bunch. We're going to spend the next few slides reviewing those. These correlate to the lab tests that you could see in your office. Most important is thyroid level, and it's measured as TSH. So in the course, we cover all this, of course. And how to interpret and how to think about it. These are some examples of the labs that we review in our lab diagnostics course, but you can get the gist of it from this. Thyroid hormone, most important in metabolism assessment, and it's measured as TSH. And some people say, well, TSH is worthless. It's definitely not worthless. It's evidence-based for diagnosing hypothyroidism. It's used to diagnose hypothyroidism. And what you're seeing when people are saying, oh, it needs to be very low and consistent, it's not consistent. Thyroid hormone, TSH, thyroid stimulated hormone, fluctuates every single day of the month. And specifically with female menstrual cycles, it will fluctuate. And at certain times of the cycle, it may be as high as 4, and at other times it may be under 2. So that's why you'll see no consistency in TSH, and that's why the range of TSH is so incredibly broad. It's decimal 3 to 5 point something. I said, well, that's way too broad of a range. That's what I said for 7 years until I started testing metabolism and realizing and studying TSH. It fluctuates a lot, and so that's why there's a huge range for it. It's not super helpful. That's why measuring metabolism is incredibly helpful, because you actually get to know what the heck is going on. But to go a little more detailed, we could test T4 and T3, but guess what? T4 and T3, the actual thyroid hormones, they fluctuate too. They fluctuate significantly. They fluctuate a lot. Measuring them can be very interesting, but doesn't tell you what's happening every day of the month, of course. So it needs to be correlated with some assessment of metabolism, or you could simply predict metabolism, which is what I'm suggesting you're doing with a calculator and making a meal plan that is a deficit from the prediction, knowing there will be some shift. So we have T4 and we have T3. That's the thyroid suite. Now, if they're out of range, we can boost them up. The main cause of hypothyroidism worldwide is low iodine. The main cause in North America is Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease. So sorting out which one's actually happening can be very informative. Thyroid hormone is made from tyrosine and iodine. Those are two things we can find in food. So consuming those foods could be helpful. It won't be helpful if the thyroid hormone is producing too much. And then there's a bigger discussion to be had about consuming iodine and tyrosine. Interesting stuff about thyroid hormone that I'd love to go further into depth on, but there's no time today. So what does it do? But I should tell you that it tells the cell to make energy. That's the whole idea. Make energy, do it. If the thyroid hormone is low, the cells can't make energy. And what happens? People gain weight. People lose their hair, get dry skin, get constipated. The cellular processes that are required for daily living are hypofunctioning. And so everything kind of slows down, but we keep eating the same amount. And therefore we store calories as fat. That's why it's very important for people to take their thyroid hormone if they have hypothyroidism. Then we have testosterone and estrogen. Gosh, these hormones are really important for metabolism. They're super important. They're both a bit anabolic, and that means that they can help to make tissue. So testosterone, you probably know, it can help people build muscle tissue. Very helpful for that. When we're going through this process of building muscle, we are expending energy. We're producing energy. And that process is metabolism boosting, of course. But if we overeat of that new metabolism, so when testosterone goes up, we get a new metabolic rate. If we still overeat, we're still going to store fat. That's why people who are on testosterone therapy, who don't lift weights and who eat too much, they can gain weight in bad weight, fat weight. And so it's important to know, and it's important to be smart about the use of food when someone is on testosterone therapy. And when you know those testosterone levels, of course, you can be very smart with your programming. So, but testosterone helps with metabolic rate. The precursor to testosterone is listed there, DHEA, also very valuable for metabolic rate. Both of these, I would say, DHEA and testosterone have two different functions on metabolism. In general, it's thought that they help with metabolic rate independent of their ability to help a person build muscle tissue. Muscle is very active, and so it helps with metabolism. But independently, they also have, so when you account for the same muscle levels, they actually have a role in metabolism too. Estrogen's also important for metabolism. And so what happens in menopause when estrogen goes very low is metabolic rate can decline aside from the loss of muscle mass. So before menopause, metabolism is largely dependent upon thyroid and total muscle tissue. After menopause, there can be a decline in metabolism separate from the loss of muscle that occurs with a lack of activity. And that may be due to estrogen levels declining. Very, very important for people to consider. Important for people to consider who have had hysterectomies, so medically induced menopause, medically induced low estrogen. This could impact metabolism in a significant way, and that's an important consideration. Then we have cortisol and insulin. Gosh, these ones are difficult. These ones are difficult to sort out because they can swing metabolism both ways. When someone is acutely stressed, their cortisol goes up, their metabolic rate can go up for a little while. But if that stress becomes chronic, metabolism can decline, even though cortisol can stay high for a while until someone reaches burnout. Even if cortisol stays high, metabolism can decline. So it's a bit of a tricky little hormone there. It causes the glycogen from the stored muscle tissue to be deposited into the blood system so you can use carbs for fuel. And what does that do? That can block fat burning. So cortisol can actually block fat burning, even though it's increasing metabolic rate to a certain extent. If it continues, then all of a sudden fat burning is, still blocked, but metabolism can decline. And that's where the issue occurs. It's the same thing with insulin. Interesting too. Like when type 1 diabetics take insulin, they gain weight. And that's because carbohydrate is being pushed into the cell to be used for fuel. But they're not expending the energy required to use it for fuel, so it's getting stored as fat. And so that's a normal process that happens. But what actually happens to the metabolic rate when that's going on? Well, insulin, if we separate it into two different metabolic rates, fat burning, carb burning, insulin blocks fat burning. Fine, but it's necessary. We got to be burning carbs for fuel. But insulin helps carb burning. So we get some value on one fuel source and some limit on the other fuel source. So in general, it can have differing effects on metabolism, but that's an important part of it. So what's important to consider will be people who are not type 1 diabetics, people who have insulin resistance, who just have high insulin all the time. They can actually get lower metabolic rates, and mostly because of its ability to stop fat burning for fuel. Interesting stuff. Then we have nutrient status. When someone comes back with a low resting metabolism, my key thing is like, do we have a deficiency here? Is there something that's blocking the body's ability to burn, to make energy, that is not related to thyroid? What could it be? Iron deficiency anemia is at the very, very top of my list. Iron deficiency anemia, very, very important. So let's say someone has really low energy, like they have chronic fatigue, for example. Well, they could have very low iron. That would lower their metabolic rate, lower their ability to produce energy. B vitamins are the same thing. We use B vitamins for all biochemical processes, really. When we think about the production of red cells, just like iron, think about B12 for sure. Folic acid, same thing, B9. So we've got B vitamins we have to be considerate of. So if we're, for example, working with a vegan, I think vegans obviously are some of the healthiest people in the world, the longest living, and sometimes super tired. And it could be because they're like in a hibernation type zone. They're going to live forever like a hibernating bear. And it might be because they're a little bit deficient in maybe iron and B12. And so making sure those levels are normal can be very supportive of a healthy energy level. Antioxidants are super important for both carbohydrate metabolism and fat metabolism. Very, very, very important to have normal levels of antioxidant. Amino acids, same thing. In order to make muscle tissue, to keep muscle tissue, we have to have adequate exposure to amino acids. So that's going to vary from person to person and from fuel source to fuel source and digestive tract to digestive tract. So a lot of this nutrient discussion happens around or is informed by digestion. Not only are we eating enough, but is it getting absorbed? Amino acids is a key thing for me because vegetable sources of protein are bound to fiber and they're harder to liberate. So therefore, they're harder to absorb. So if we can't liberate the amino acids from the fiber, how are they going to get absorbed? So, but I'm still in full support of having plant-based proteins, but we need to make sure we're getting enough amino acids. If we're not, there is a risk of having a lower metabolism. The second component of this is the thermic effective food of protein. We just burn lots of calories while we're eating protein. That's a fact. It's 20% of the calories from the protein is actually consumed to break it down. Magnesium and selenium, two very important other minerals other than iron. Gosh, maybe we should be thinking about the whole mineral suite. Yes, in fact, minerals, vitamins, everything are important for metabolic rate. Magnesium is a key cofactor in many metabolic processes in the body. So even if all the signals are right, the energy might not be produced effectively because of a magnesium deficiency, which is incredibly common. And then in order to convert thyroid hormone into something useful, active form of thyroid hormone, we need to have enough selenium. So we need to be supporting selenium if we suspect that this is metabolism decline because of inappropriate conversion or a lack of conversion between T4 and T3, the thyroid hormones. Again, we review these in the course, and they're super fun and interesting to go through. Then we have more lifestyle, functional aspects here. I have an obsession with sleep. I think if aside from muscle mass, my gosh, sleep is important for metabolism. In fact, even on the topic of muscle mass, we can't build muscle and keep muscle if we're not sleeping through the night, because we then will lack testosterone, adiponectin, and growth hormone. These are important hormones, and cortisol too, important hormones for maintaining muscle mass. So my target here is if a person has a smartwatch, to measure REM and deep, get a sense of how much REM and deep they're getting. And I'm looking for 90 minutes of each. 90 minutes of REM, 90 minutes of deep. I think that's very supportive of metabolism. I think it's very, very, very helpful for metabolic rate. We have a ton of people coming in with low metabolic rate who, although where everything is normal. And it turns out that it's just that the sleep quality and quantity is insufficient. So it doesn't have to be 7 hours. It has to be 90 minutes of REM and deep, and then the rest of it made up by light. That's how I look at it, at this. So we're talking 3 hours of these two core phases. The rest of it, could be 4 hours of light. It could be less. It could be 3 hours. Maybe 6 hours is enough for that person in total, as long as they're getting quality and duration in the REM and deep sleep. For metabolism, very, very important. Why is it important? These hormones are released and they're controlled by keeping adequate, tight sleep-wake cycles. Cortisol, adiponectin, testosterone, growth hormone. This is all going on while we're getting 90 minutes of REM and deep. We have body composition. I can't harp on it enough. We have to have adequate muscle mass. If you have too much, everything can be exhausting, but the metabolism can be good. So if you're carrying around 90, like we're measuring people's exercise capacity, and people who have over 90 pounds of muscle, they're burning more calories at lower intensities and getting fatigued a little quicker if their mitochondria are not optimized for aerobic capacity. But guess what? That means that they're burning a lot of calorie. That means that they're able to make lots of energy to facilitate the movement. Muscle's good. Then we have activity. So this is a really, really important thing on the metabolism side of things. So picture this. Someone who doesn't train at all has low metabolic rate. After burn improves metabolic rate. Lifting weights and recovering from said session boosts metabolism. Before we do resting tests, we can't exercise within 24 hours because metabolism's elevated for repair. Then we have the aerobic and anaerobic sessions. Cardio improves metabolic rate. Here's a wild thing I've learned from 700 metabolism tests. Athletes burn less calories during their fitness tests. They're very efficient during all of their movements. But at rest, their metabolisms are generally better. Aerobic activity boosts metabolic rate, boosts resting metabolic rate. But also, at the same time, paradoxically, improves efficiency during cardio. So you can do more cardio, and you need to eat more to sustain life at rest when you're fit. So aerobic activity is very, very important. Don't skip cardio. Come on. People are saying, if you want to lose weight, just lift weights and eat less. I don't think so. It's not perfect. Perfect is 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week. And it would be very nice if a lot of that could be made up of cardio. Then we have macronutrient choice. Let's not ignore the thermic effect of food. If resting metabolism is 60 to 70% of your day's calorie burn, well, what are we going to do with the other 30%? It's made up of activities of daily living, and then it's including exercise. Let's call that including exercise. But then digestion plays an important part of total daily energy expenditure. And my gosh, there's differences in calorie burn during digestion. This is why most effective weight loss programs are high protein. That doesn't mean a person needs to be high protein forever. Like, yes, I saw the recent study about isoleucine. I think it was one of the branch chains. Maybe this is why people who eat less protein live longer when you compare big populations. But most people overeat. They overeat their calories. So those studies are not super helpful. Like we have to look at studies where people are eating a normal amount or a slight deficit to achieve an optimal body composition, and then looking at the protein consumption. So basically when people eat protein, 20% of those calories are used in digestion. For carbs, it's 10%. And for fats, it's 2 to 3%. So if you were taught the thermic effect of food is 10%, I think it's important to know this is the actual breakdown. 10% was the average, and it's because protein is so high and fat is so low. So what should we be doing? What should we be doing? We don't want to restrict fat because then the hormones might go down. We need fat to make hormones. But maybe we should be increasing our protein consumption while we're on plan until we reach our goal, and then lowering our protein consumption once we reach our goal and entering into more of a maintenance protein level. That's how I approach things. So we're doing 0.75 grams per pound of body weight usually for protein level. until they reach their goal and then going down below 0.5 grams per body weight. So in pounds. So let's say someone weighs 200, then we're doing 150 grams until they reach their goal, and say their goal was to get down to 180. Well, then we're going to, reduce the protein down to 90. Take it all the way down to 0.5 times the body weight. And gosh, it's been effective. We can maintain muscle at that level of protein. It's been awesome. And on the way there, appetite is suppressed, metabolism is enhanced. That's part of our metabolism boosting program, right? Like eat more protein and train. And even in a deficit, we see metabolism improve. Then we have medications. So medications is a bit of more of a complex topic, which I'm going to be preparing a lecture for continuing education for another organization for soon. Stimulant medications improve metabolism. Thyroid medications improve metabolism. Other medications might lower metabolic rate. And that can make things extra tricky. And we'll cover a little bit more about that in just a second. So what disrupts metabolism? Well, lots of things, but they're all related to the list we just reviewed. What if someone has a digestive disorder and they can't absorb nutrients, specifically minerals, B vitamins, antioxidants? Then all of a sudden it's like they're in a fasted state, and fasting lowers metabolism. So malabsorption causing deficiency will lower metabolic function, metabolic rate. Aging. As we age, metabolism declines it starts between the ages of 50 and 60 and continues at 1% per year, regardless of muscle loss. If a person loses muscle, it declines faster. So it's very, very important for people to maintain their muscle forever and do everything possible to try to accomplish that. That's why we use a lot of amino acid therapy and creatine therapy to try to help with that. Disease-causing muscle loss, sarcopenia is the term, and activity loss decreases metabolism. You can see where I'm going there. If you exercise less or if you lose muscle because of a disease, metabolism declines. Fair point. Lifestyle, injury, or illness, which limits exercise, lowers metabolism, and sleep cycle maintenance. So if someone has a sleep cycle that's disrupted, they will not have adequate growth hormone secretion, testosterone secretion, etc., and experience a lower metabolic rate. Then we have the lifestyle kind of stuff, right? Calorie restriction. You probably know this. People who fast, people who overtrain. Labeling overtraining is not something I can do today. It's very difficult. It's hard to know what is overtraining. It's very unlikely that any of us are doing it. Think about endurance athletes. Maybe they are. Everybody else, we're fine. Chronic macronutrient restriction. So taking one macronutrient and not eating that forever and ever may have a negative effect on metabolism because of nutrient deficiencies that might be associated with that macronutrient restriction. Say, for example, magnesium and carbohydrates or fiber and carbohydrates, for example. These things can impact metabolism negatively. Disease causing hormone imbalance. So something where maybe a person has to be on testosterone suppression for prostate cancer, or had a hysterectomy, like my previous example, or has some brain tumor that's impacting their ability to produce hormones. That will impact metabolism. And then we have a short medication grouping here of the groups that lower metabolic rate. In general, there's some medications within these groups that do not lower metabolic rate, but most of the drugs in these groups lower metabolism. So someone has suspected low metabolic rate. I'm eating less and moving more and not losing. What should we do? Well, here's a quick list that we have a look at. CBC is the red cells. So we're looking for anemia and then doing an iron panel to confirm that and a B12 panel to confirm that it's not B12 deficiency anemia. Thyroid level, total T, total testosterone, DHEA, and if it's a female, estrogen. And then I love to have a fasting insulin. I like to see insulin at that time because I think it's very informative. Functional lab assessment, also super informative, although very expensive. So we like to do these only when necessary, when there's some really serious thing going on and we need to look way deep, way deep. So then we go through this, but not all of them, just what could be appropriate for the person in front of us, individualized care. Maybe it's a detailed nutrient assessment. I like a few different ones. I like SpectraCell and Cell Science Systems. Looking for nutrient status, thinking about all the ones we just reviewed. I like an iodine panel. I like to see about the level of iodine in the body And I like to see included in that panel is selenium and then a bunch of toxins that disrupt thyroid function, like bromine, for example, and mercury and arsenic. That's a really cool one to see when someone suspects a low metabolic rate. I like a hormone panel. This is just the one I use, but hormone panels are really helpful in low metabolism for all the reasons I've already discussed. Stool analysis if it's malabsorption. If we're trying to optimize for absorption, maybe we need to think about the bacterial balance, the markers of digestion. I use GI map for this, but I also use one from US Biotech. And then we have cortisol and melatonin assessment. So if someone's not sleeping, maybe we need to know about their stress hormone. There's one hormone we can't test, which is called orexin. It's in their waking hormone. But these two we can test like crazy. And it's so helpful to optimize sleeping patterns. In office, what can be done? You might not have access to these, but clinics around you probably do. Muscle mass assessments, very, very important. Resting metabolic rate when we want to guarantee that we have a low metabolism, yes. Continuous glucose monitoring if we're tracking the insulin and trying to prescribe or promote a diet that's going to lower their insulin level. Continuous blood sugar monitoring makes a big difference. Then we need to talk about nutritional strategies. Well, in order to do that, we have to set some goals. In chronic fatigue because of low metabolic rate, we're shooting for a very high level of iron, and that's tracked by a ferritin of 100. Thyroid needs, I like it to be between decimal 3 and 2, but it's difficult to keep it in there all the time. So we have to have a bit of wiggle room. But there's some strategies naturopathically or holistically that can be useful in supporting thyroid levels, including selenium, zinc, tyrosine, iodine. DHEA and testosterone, I want to be in the top 1/3 of the age-dependent range for these hormones. Gosh, that can make a difference. Healthy fats help, eating enough protein helps, antioxidants and zinc make a big difference for testosterone and DHEA. Like I said, we're optimizing sleep. Nutrition plays a big role here. Saturated fats cause problems sleeping, sugar before bed, problems sleeping, processed food, problems sleeping. Lots of other things to do, but nutritionally, those three are very important to me. Working on muscle mass, making sure a person is getting enough protein exposure, somewhere between decimal 5 and 1 gram per pound of body weight. Activity level. Gosh, we want to be boosting activity. Getting up to that Health Canada level of 150 minutes of moderate intensity per week, I think is very, very good for metabolism. It could also be 90 minutes of intense work, by the way, but I find that's a lot harder to do 3 30-minute very intense sessions. And then a very minor deficit in calories, not more than 20% calorie deficit, or else metabolism is going to decline more. It's going to be a real problem. And then taking advantage of the thermic effect of food, promoting healthy lean proteins and plant proteins when you can to try to boost metabolic rate. Building a weight loss program needs to consider the principles of metabolism healing, balanced metabolic rate, healthy metabolic rate. Don't do deep deficits. Fasting protocols can be a problem when programming for weight loss. They can be very good for the immune system and very good for other things, but they can cause a real issue if you're working on someone's metabolism. Restricting one macronutrient can be a real problem. That's not to say that I don't prescribe keto diets, like in brain cancer, for example, or in juvenile epilepsy. We do use keto diets, but we don't ever like to use it for anybody else. Making sure to support all the micronutrients, including antioxidants from veggies and fruit. Skipping these is not that helpful. We need these antioxidants. Being sure to keep the protein focus while trying to keep saturated fat low, it can be done. Finally, we have accountability. Individualized care from an accountability standpoint is my goal here. I don't think we need a cookie cutter plan. I think everybody needs something different. Some people like very detailed, you know this better than I do. Some people like very detailed, very fancy nutrition plans where you're getting beautiful looking meals all the time. And some people want 3 ingredient recipes for 3 meals a day that are super easy to make and quick. We have to know the person in front of us and be open to working with them outside of the visit. So the same thing goes for accountability. Some people need to be in your office every single month. And you have to ask them, are you the type of person who needs to be here every month to stay on track? And if they are, yeah, okay, let's book it in. A lot of people don't need your help at all. Some people need to come back in a year and they'll reach their goal without having any follow-ups. And that's fine too, whatever a person needs, but we have to check in and we have to know what the person needs by asking them and then following up to make sure nothing has changed. So we make ourselves available Listen, if you have cravings or you're tired or you're having problems following, no problem. Let's make adjustments. We'll do it on the fly. Message me, let me know how it's going, and let's optimize. My favorite thing is to meet between 6 and 12 weeks. Humans like that period, right? Somewhere between 6 weeks and 3 months is a logical follow-up time for most humans. So we typically say, I think it's smart for you to come back at this time. Would that be okay? And very often say, yes, sure. And I say, would you like me to book it? And then we book it. Consider this a holistic approach to metabolism optimization. We cruise through a lot of things. Of course, they're all covered in the course, but I hope you got a sense of a rational thought process around metabolism optimization when you're building weight loss plans by watching today's session. Again, the course is coming up soon. Laboratory Diagnostics and Clinical Practice. It's a really great course. It's a lot of fun. I take into account some key features of adult education. It's not all slides. There are slides, but there's tons of group work and discussions, and it's more focused towards adult education and less towards lecture-based sessions. Check out my podcast. It's called Personalized. Tune in on all your favorite platforms. You can find us and listen in and give me some feedback if you don't mind. Okay, I'll open the floor to questions. Jason, turning it over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, David. That was great. And yeah, before we move into the Q&A, just reminding everyone, so David's course, Understanding Lab Diagnostics, starts February 6th. It'll run for 8 Tuesdays. So every Tuesday night starting February 6th. For those that are on the West Coast, it would be 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then for those in the East, it would be 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to just throw a link in the chat where you can go to register and also get a breakdown of what will be covered in each session. So you can kind of take a look at that. I will say if you're interested and you're kind of teetering, or, this is something that has kind of grabbed your attention, this tends to fill up quick. I just registered a few students today already. So it's definitely something that you want to jump on if you're interested. So with that, let's, if you want to put your questions using the little Q&A function down at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. Okay. So I'll just answer these first couple questions regarding the continuing education course. Yes, it will be delivered online, so you don't have to attend in person. And then we have a question: is there a certain time of the month that is best to test thyroid?
Oh, that's a great question, Connie. Thank you very much. So it depends if you are wanting to see the level below 2. I don't think there's a best time to test because we simply want to have the thyroid between decimal 3 and 5. So I would say that I don't think there's a best time because I'm not dogmatic about it being below 2. If we were to say have someone where it was between 2 and 5 and they had a bunch of symptoms of low metabolism, then I would consider testing it at multiple times to get a sense of how it's fluctuating over the course of the month. So maybe once in the first half of the cycle and once in the second half of the cycle. It's only important for cycling females, by the way. So yeah, it would be nice to do both to get a sense of if it's fluctuating for that person or not. And that's how I'd like to approach that. Do you want me to read these, Jason?
It's up to you. I can feed them to you, or if it's easier for you to read them.
I can read them. I can read them. Olga had a question there. It says, what is the optimal fasting insulin value? Awesome question. We use something called the HOMA-IR, Hemostatic Model of Insulin Resistance Calculator. If you just Google HOMA-IR, a website comes up where you put in insulin and fasting sugar, and that gives an insulin resistance score, and we want that score to be below 1.9. And so for most people, that ends up being, in Canada here, a fasting sugar below 5.5 and an insulin below 50. And then typically it works out. Then we have another question that says, I have a client who's 60, last cycle was in 2016, 5'5", 188, trouble losing weight, prefers to fast 16/8, sleep hygiene we're working on, high cholesterol, wants to bring it down naturally, but the weight isn't moving. I believe stress, sleep, and protein is an issue, but I was thinking maybe metabolic is at play here with the cortisol, as she has tons of energy. Sure. I'm interested to know, this is for Fa. I'm interested to know what calorie level you have her eating at. What's the deficit that you've created and is it based on a calculated metabolic rate? So if you have time to answer that, that would be super helpful to know what depth of deficit has she eaten in and not had success with. That's so yes, it's calories in, calories out. But basically you have to guarantee that the person's eating in a deficit or else the weight is not going to come off because there's nowhere for it to go. Then we have Cameron. Thanks for doing this. Since you cover lab diagnostics, how do you share your information with clients without diagnosing them? Oh yeah, great question. So the laws in Ontario sort of handcuff us here, stating we are not allowed to diagnose anyone with anything, only treat them once a diagnosis is made. How do you work around this with lab diagnostics? Oh yeah, so it's assessing the diagnostic tools. We're not telling you how to diagnose anything, but we go through how they are diagnosed. So it's called diagnosis, but you could call it lab values for nutritionists or lab tests for nutritionists. We don't have to use the word diagnostics in the title of the course, but you're not diagnosing based on the information found in this course. You're able to communicate with the team who's done the diagnosis and be part of the solution by being able to speak the language. I hope that helps, Cameron. I don't know if that answers the question. Olga said, can you please spell it again? HOMA-IR. Okay. Oh, Fa got back to me and said 15 to 1650. I didn't use the calculator. She was using much less prior and almost no protein. Oh yeah, good point. Good point. So let me tell you how I do this. So what I would do is go to the Harris-Benedict equation tool and plug in her height and weight, and then predict her daily activities very conservatively. At 5'5", I would say 400 calories. So let's say the calculator spit out 1600, and then you would add 400 to get to 2000 TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. And then, so if she didn't exercise, she'd have to eat 1500 to lose any weight at all, 1 pound per week, because it's 500 calories per week, per day, per pound for a week. But if she did exercise, then she would lose a little faster. So let's say that, so you could subtract 500 from that, and then you could have her exercise a little bit, and it should help. But sometimes what happens when people eat 16-8 and have very high cortisol is they have low metabolism. And so it happens. So in order to fix it, we get protein exposures, like you're saying in your comment, protein exposures, not the old school, it's not 2001, 6 times a day, but 3 times a day would be super helpful. Like wake up, have a bit of protein. A couple hours later, have a bit of protein. And her metabolism will come up. Fa says she's eating less, so I had to give her more calories, but quality nutrition. I love it. I think you're on the right track. I would optimize for protein, and in that case, I would definitely be eating above 90 grams of protein per day, preferring somewhere around 130 grams. And I bet with 1,500 calories and 130 grams of protein per day that she will start losing. Mary says, what machine do you use to measure muscle mass and fat content? It's called the InBody 570. Thank you very much. Then in the chat, there's a question that says, what's my college number? 24216. Thanks for asking. How do I get to the chat? 24216. I hope I don't owe you any drinks. Nicole, sure. Nicole, do you have a college number? I think you're talking about the Royal Military College. Then we have, I think it's Andrea, but I can't see the names. What's the name of the test that uses BMR again? The calculator that I would use is called the Harris-Benedict equation. Then we talked about optimal fasting value. Oh, and I'm clear. 20994. Thank you. Thank you. This little inside for RMC graduates. I haven't had an inside in a long time, so thank you, Nicole. Okay, have I answered all the questions? I think I have.
Yeah.
Anything else? Now's the time. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Minutes, so if there's any last minute questions, otherwise we'll call it an evening.
I just want to say thank you for everyone who came out to listen. I know a lot of you have stayed around the entire time, including for the question period. That's I'm so grateful. We have this lab diagnostics course that's incredibly valuable, but more courses coming out for CE. So check out IHN website and info to learn more about what we're offering and what I'm going to be teaching in over the next year. Mary said you didn't discuss cancer. Do you work with clients who have tumors? Yes, we do. We do support people who have been diagnosed with cancer. And typically we're helping them not lose weight. So we're teaching them how much they need to eat so that they don't lose weight while they go through conventional care. Oh, there's more coming in. Hey, way to go. Hannah says, could you repeat how you calculate how much someone should eat? Yes. Okay. BMR, step 1. That's the calculator, Harris-Benedict equation. Step 2, activities of daily living. You're predicting it. If they're at a desk all day, it's somewhere between 400 and 500, just to keep it simple. Then, calorie burn during exercise. So you can assess that. You can use a calculator, or you can use what the device is telling them, or you can just simply predict it. I have a device that tells me all the numbers. So I work with a physiology team who does all the work, but it's relatively easy to predict. And you can use the smartwatches and the machines and all that. So now you have total daily energy expenditure, BMR, plus activities of daily living, ADL, plus exercise. And then you get a total number. And then if you subtract from that, they're going to lose weight. I know it sounds simple and everyone's like, well, that's calories in, calories out. Yes, it is. And today we've discussed all the reasons why it doesn't work when people have a low metabolism, low iron, low B12. We could find all those though, simple blood tests, and they don't cost very much. Then I'm getting some thank yous. Hey, good.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place for us to wrap it up. So David, thank you again for this. Looking forward to the course coming up in February. I put the link in the chat there. You can also reach out to us here at IHN if you have any questions about registration, tuition, what to expect, all that good stuff. And like David said, thank you all for coming out this evening and spending an hour with us. We appreciate it, and hopefully you got some value out of it as well. And David, thanks again.
Oh, you're so welcome. Before you go, Hannah asked, how much do you subtract? 500 calories for 1 pound per week and 750 for 1.5 pounds per week. Thanks, Jason. Sorry, I had to answer that because that's an important one.
Okay.
Okay, I put that in the chat, Hannah. I hope you got that. I'm going to stay on the line for 2 minutes just to make sure you got that. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. Have a great evening.